Ryan's Audiobooks 1-1, The Psychic Bible. The Apocryphal Scriptures of Genesis P-Orridge in the Third Mind of the Temple of Psychic Youth. The Psychic Bible is a religious text and therefore is covered under the Fair Use Act in American law. But, just for the sake of, let's say, giving credit, I'll even read the copyrights. Especially because it's got this snuck in here. The method of magic, the aim of science, old TOPI proverb. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The words are just confessions of a mask. They say that thoughts have wings, but our wings have been clipped. The words have gotten in the way, and yet we are just limping forward. Yet instead of trying to find the thoughts behind the mask, the thoughts that really count without the words, we have fallen for the reflection of the shadow of civilization, a civilization that knows no honor and knows no respect, and knows not its desires or true meaning, a lie within a lie within a lie. The time is long past for a new beginning, the caress within the iron glove. Monte Cazaza. Embrace reality by imagination. Austin Osman Spare. The specialized sciences of our times are concentrating on the study of the three constants of life: sexual instinct, the sentiment of death, and the anguish of space-time. Salvador Dali. Assume power focus. Old TOPI proverb. The Apocryphal Scriptures of Genesis P-Orridge in the Third Mind of the Temple of Psychic Youth. Dedicated to my other half, the angelic being Lady J. P-Orridge, 1969 to 2007. He is still her Feral House. There's a picture of Genesis. Acknowledgements. Once upon a time, we were wondering what would happen if a band took its fans seriously and chose to encourage them to explore anything. This book is a result and was 30 eras in the constructing. TOPY remains a unique experiment in collective vision and living, warts and all. Not so much a book as a manual of alternative ways of thinking, of being, and of caring giving. The Psychic Bible is a result of cooperation and shared dreams, hopes and dynamic imagination. To our knowledge, never in the astery of our world's cultures has there ever been such a single-minded, unconditionally dedicated collective system of focused orgasm within ritualized, living and gender revolutionary exploration. These objectives are almost indecipherable in our age of blind consumerism, data addiction, and inertia as a way of L if E. This book is a research document of which we are proud to have been primary instigator, a manual of possibilities and impossibilities. At the very least, a record of our courageous attempts to defeat control and seek ways to consciously take command of our behavior and our identity. An amazing team of individuals was drawn to our passionate dream. Special gratitude goes to Joe A. Raposa for having the vision to propose the original edition, Jason Louv, who dedicated months of his irreplaceable time to editing the bulk of the contents from thousands of pages and hundreds of documents, Tom Hallowell, the ultimate coyote who founded TOPYNA, Monte Cazaza, who was, as always, there at the conception, Peter Christopherson for unique guidance, Jean-Pierre Turmel, Benjamin Tischer, Carl Abrahamson, Malik, Brother Words, Sister Shadows, Caress and Genesis P-Orridge, Jay Kinney, Cully Fisher, Edward O'Doud, Bill Breeze, John Balance, Hazel Hill, who turned a dream into an authentic classic, Lady J. P-Orridge, who insisted this book must be completed, and most of all, Adam Parfrey and Jody Weil. Adam and Jody demonstrated saintly patience as this brick of wisdoms evolved, showing a level of trust and kindness fully in keeping with the one true TOPI tribe. Thank you all, and all those unnamed others who made this adventure possible. Genesis P-Orridge, New York City, 2009. The table of contents, which I'm not going to read piece by piece. And I decided to read the forewords of this because they're pretty relevant. So this is foreword. The deconstruction of a map of an unknown territory. Probably no word does better justice to the TOPY phenomenon than a culture. Meshing a cult with culture, there's also a prefixed trace of accident, if you will. The defined concept as such was integrated in the inter-TOPY lingo in the late 80s, and then grew to become a readily accepted general term for anything cultural yet decidedly occult and spiritual. As a more or less unnamed concept, a culture has already been active in TOPY since day one. The field of research was never ever occultism per se or culture per se, but always consisted of interchangeability where eventually the clear-cut borders were gently erased. Books, pamphlets, newsletters, film and video screenings, record and cassette releases, and other manifestations could certainly contain more or less blatant esoteric form or content, but it was in no way a prerequisite. The literal meaning of occult, as in hidden, was given a wider perspective than the merely magical one, quote unquote. Hidden information, forgotten personalities, discarded thought forms, untrendy thinkers, eclectic evolutionaries, and anachronistic anarchs, dusting off shelved illuminations from past ages and offering forgotten morsels of human intelligence, proved to be a very fertile soil indeed. A Promethean strike force that passed on the torch of enlightenment from the dawn of mankind to our own revolutionary times. From very early on, there was a heavy focus on the unhampered sharing of information, hidden or otherwise. All one had to do was let one's interest in areas of research be known through newsletters and other channels, and one was certain to receive something of interest. A second-hand book long out of print, a compendium of Xeroxes from someone's equally enthusiastic archive, a cassette tape copy of some recordings never released on a record or broadcast on radio. Seeing the global TOPY network as a precursor to the internet is not far-fetched at all. The first generation developers of cyberculture were certainly aware of, and some of them even active in TOPY and its ideas and ideals. Culture in itself is usually associated with performing arts, painting, music, literature, and many other forms of traditional manifestation. The sphere of culture. But essentially, culture is exactly what the word entails, a culture, a structure or soil that contains the implicit possibilities of growth and manifestation of life, and in extension, ideas and information. The merging of sperm and egg and their continued growth as one DNA programmed entity in a womb is perhaps the clearest and most potent symbol of culture. Many of TOPY access points' regional headquarters were involved in releasing material for distribution books, magazines, records, videos, and so on. At TOPY Scan, the Scandinavian section, we focused at times more on these kinds of activities than on the actual meaning of members or on doing strange rituals together. The more esoteric and magical activities certainly took place too, but quite often these rituals were quote unquote cosmic boosters for the success of, for instance, a new magazine project or a new record. The intimate seeds of individuals were sown in a communal soil for the benefit of a cultural manifestation, these becoming in turn seeds in their own right, blooming in a more extroverted universe of readers, listeners, art lovers, etc. On the more distinctly magical level, we organized several workshops in shamanism, meaning here using archaic techniques of, for instance, drumming to induce states of trance used for information gathering or entirely different higher levels of consciousness, and Western ceremonial magic. We made treks into the Swedish countryside, stayed up all night, and tried quite successfully to communicate with hidden aspects of nature and our own minds. The rituals suggested in the Grey Book, the main TOPY compendium dealing with magic and philosophy, and other key documents, were often the starting point for members wanting to experiment with meditation, traditional methods of ceremonial magic, and one's own sexuality in a directed way. Rituals were by no means confined to the individual monthly sigilizing process, as recommended in the Grey Book, but would develop and grow in organic forms, either individually or with other members. The status of Eden for the actively sigilizing men and Kali for the women signified an even stronger internal bond. That is, if one wanted to. There were never any demands on Kalis or Edens to do or achieve anything, except possibly to be truer to themselves than they had been up to that point. What the central TOPY ritual consisted of, at least structurally, was that on the 23rd of each month at 2300 hours, the dedicated adepts would perform a sigilizing ritual in and on an artwork designed by themselves specifically for the desired goal. This piece of highly charged talismanic art was then sent into a TOPY station, bigger and more administrative headquarters than the access points. The idea was to impose or inspire self-discipline and regularity, to unite with other adepts in time, to initiate personal empirical research about ritual magic, and not forgetting to honor the weird synchronistic concept of the number 23 as inherited from TOPY mentors William Burroughs and Brian Geisen. The augmented level of 23 consecutive sent in 23 sigils was reached by very few individuals connected to the TOPY Europe headquarters. Usually, however, that level of commitment to an experimental yet communal goal manifested itself in other ways too. Active help with administration, practical assistance, creating original things, text, images, music for TOPY publications, etc. and thus quite a few people were able to achieve quite a lot. Excuse me while I sip my coffee. The structure of official TOPY sigilizing combines elements of traditional sexual magic using the elevated state of mind reached at and before the orgasmic climax to mentally charge a symbol of the desired of the ideal, and using the highly vitally charged residual secretions, semen and vaginal fluids, meditational focus, Eastern mantric techniques, Austin Osman spares, development of an individual alphabet of desire, elements of sacrificial use of blood and saliva, as well as other techniques to maximize the experience as such. Not forgetting creating a totally individual based artwork to act as the receiving vessel or talisman for the desired, thereby integrating art in the most important and primordial function as a magical and mystical tool to achieve union with higher cosmic levels of mind and to express one's affinity and desires with and to these levels. Very seldom is this art historic aspect of TOPY considered. The archival collection of contemporary talismanic art, ranging in styles from totally primitive abstractions to very refined draftsmanship, over sexually explicit collages to mind bending mixed media paintings and sculptures, is totally unique in every sense of the word. The term magical art is usually ascribed to totemic objects from Africa or other non Western areas, and it's usually something having to do with the past. In the case of the TOPY quote unquote collection, all the gathered works are indeed contemporary present, but all bordering on, at least in the very moment of creation, the future. Another highly interesting aspect of this art is that it is in many ways an anti art. It's not art made specifically for other people to see, and thereby it doesn't fit in with the contemporary ideals of pleasing in a market. Here we can return to the very origins of art, cave paintings, etc. The idea was not to have a glass of wine together with tribal kin in a cozy cave to self aggrandize through witty, ironic criticisms. The idea was to impose one's will on the world outside, your personal sphere or that of the tribe. Art as magical evocation. Whether other members or other tribes actually could see or understand what one had inscribed or painted was beside the point. On an individual level, the experimenting was active and I would say radical. As an administrator of TOPY Scan and later TOPY Europe, I was fortunate to see and handle European colleagues in Eden's 23 sigils in a trust that has been and is and will continue to be honored. I was also involved in a proto-creative dialogue with several members on magical results, effects, breakthroughs, up and downs of various techniques, etc. Hearing what had worked for others, I empirically assembled and concocted my own grimoires and shared my findings with those who had been sharing in their turn. In a cultural TOPY concept in genuinely creative action, there were also magical workings created and performed together. During the international gathering, so-called roto-rites, elaborate and ceremonial workings would be performed for goals that dealt with greater TOPY ideals and visions. At TOPY Scan and TOPY Europe, we would not infrequently experiment with sigilizing and other kinds of rituals together. Sharing those kinds of intense and electrified physical and emotional moments with others in trust was a real eye-opener to many of those involved, including myself. The creative framework of a uniting crystal clear goal and of experimental techniques that evoke a previously unfelt emotional charge in the ritual chamber can be quite an empowering setting to be in. At the era of conception, not an inappropriate symbol in this case, wink, the TOPY network, or network as POrridge would aptly call it, was tightly interwoven with the musical constellation Psychic Television, PTV. From 1982 onwards, PTV in their many guises were missionaries of individual liberty on a seemingly endless tour. TOPY as a living entity was very integrated in PTV and became philosophical fuel not only for the band members but also for those already active or those just curious when the multicolored psychic circus rolled by all over their world. Some TOPY members liked quote unquote PTV and some did not. What was obvious though was that the Gesamtkunstwerk aspect of what seemed to quote unquote others to be just a weird band was an enormous source of inspiration for most of us. It was possible to do anything. Music was not confined to pop or noise or anything. Neither were stage presentations, the performances, the artwork for the records limited in any way. Many of the young people involved in various phases of PTV grew up to be creative and successful artists in their own right. If there's something I think unites all these people, it's an open mindedness, a creative courage, a spontaneity that in many regards have their origins in the uncompromising psychic television and temple of psychic youth, Kaleidoscope. What constitutes the essence of all this? There are so many things that come to mind, but I guess the most quintessential ones are the offering of different possibilities, of alternative options, of alternative routes of inspiring courage and will, of breaking apart uncomfortable imposed patterns and showing by example that it is after all possible to reassemble the bits in very creative ways. Finally, the concept of quote unquote occult, quote unquote culture, and even quote unquote a culture become redundant on a higher level. Here's what's here for us all in our apparently finite time frame and the definite possibility to access the infinite. How and why we as individuals go about this is another story, no less interesting. The first phase in face of TOPY as an experimental centrifugal intelligence quote unquote agency was so fertile, it took on a life of its own and thereby touched upon the infinite. Regardless if one's path is that of a hermit or that of an ardent team player, a lot can be learned from this strange manifestation in human history and culture that has, more than any group structure before, taken on the conscious decision to give form and voice, dare I say even direction, to the collective unconscious. That was Carl Abramson, aka Eden 162, Stockholm, Sweden, 2006. The deconstruction of a map of an unknown territory. And that is introduction one of the Psychic Bible by Genesis P-Orridge and those she associated with. Tune in tomorrow for more.